Investors for Sustainable Development Alliance. I'm Andrew Edgecliffe-Johnson, the US business editor from the Financial Times. I'm delighted to be here, and I'd like to start by thanking the Deputy Secretary-General, our hosts, and the members of the Alliance for including me in today's event. To set the scene, I can report that at the Financial Times, we see this as a unique and critical moment for business and finance, and for their interplay with public policy. In recent months, the Financial Times has argued that it's time for a more responsible, sustainable model of capitalism to emerge. We've launched a new platform called Moral Money, which we're trying to use to cover the most significant developments from companies, their investors, and policymakers who are working towards that goal. Consumer pressure on companies to take action on environmental and other public policy challenges is clearly rising. As we saw at last month's UN General Assembly, many leading businesses are rising to that challenge, moving from why to how as they think about aligning with the UN's Sustainable Development Goals. But UNGA also made clear that we are still falling short of hitting the goals by 2030, so there is still much work to be done, and much innovation needed around setting standards, credible processes, and frameworks. What's also needed is not just moral money, but more money. Trillions of dollars more than is currently committed in development financing. Today marks the launch of a significant initiative to bring more money, more innovation, and more coordination to the challenge of addressing that shortfall. The GISD Alliance was born from a recognition of the important role private finance and business can play in raising resources to meet the goals, and in ensuring that those resources are allocated to best effect. GISD members will focus on scaling up the amount of long-term finance and investment directed to sustainable development, on steering resources to the countries and sectors where they are most needed, and on enhancing the impact of such funding. That need for scalable solutions will require harmonizing standards for sustainability reporting and impact measurement, and establishing stronger alignment between investors, governments, and multilateral institutions. Most importantly, if you read the joint statement signed by the members of the GISD Alliance, you will see that they recognize the need for actionable solutions that enable mobilization and alignment of long-term finance and investment with the UN's Sustainable Development Goals. Concrete action is what these companies' customers, employees, and investors are expecting, and what we will be watching for at the Financial Times. I'd now like to invite the Deputy Secretary-General to deliver her remarks.
Thank you very much. Well, good morning, everyone. Special welcome to our co-chairs, Leila Fourie and Oliver Bäte, Excellencies, distinguished guests, and our colleagues. Thank you very much for joining us at this very important launch of the Global Investors for Sustainable Development Alliance. We have an impressive coalition of 30 CEOs of large private sector companies from both financial and non-financial sectors and from every corner of the globe. The Secretary-General established this alliance for a simple reason: to accelerate much-needed action on the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, which is our globally agreed blueprint for people and planet. This alliance has come together to drive financing for the 2030 Agenda as we enter a crucial decade of action to deliver on the SDGs, and in particular to help forge concrete solutions for securing the long-term finance and investments that will be necessary to achieve the Sustainable Development Agenda. Together, the Alliance represents the complete investment chain. I thank every member for joining the UN to help secure a prosperous, healthy, and a sustainable future that hopefully leaves no one behind. I also thank the government of Sweden for their support, as well as so many other members of our UN family. Our world has a number of crucial agreements to tackle: poverty, inequality, the climate crisis, among many. These include the Addis Ababa Action Agenda for Financing for Development, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, and the Paris Agreement on Climate Change. As the Alliance put it in their joint statement today, the global investors for sustainable development can be instrumental in helping to deliver on these agreements, focusing advocacy and action on facilitating the scale-up of long-term finance and investment in sustainable development. As we heard earlier this morning in our meeting with the Secretary-General, the Alliance could help bring forward a number of solutions and take concrete actions to increase the supply of resources and capacities available for investment in sustainable development, thus channeling capital to countries and sectors where it is most needed. The potential is enormous. For example, as we heard this morning and in other of our fora through the GA week, green bonds have grown from zero to over 200 billion in a decade. 2 out of 3 institutional investors factor sustainability in their investment decisions. Environmental, social, and governance funds are rising rapidly, and we know demand is only growing. 3/4 of individual investors, particularly millennials and women, have expressed interest in sustainable investing. Every day, more and more asset owners are linking their investments to sustainability criteria. But there's still much more to do. We know it is both ethical and good business sense to invest in sustainable development. Shareholders and individuals, consumers, want their funds to be invested sustainably. Young people across the world are demanding action and shaping preferences. And more businesses are committing to make the transformation to sustainability, understanding that it is good for people, it's good for the planet, and it certainly is good for the bottom line. Now's the time, we believe, to massively scale up those actions, particularly at the country level. We also count on member states to play their part in securing the enabling environment for long-term investment for sustainable development. Colleagues, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, this is a very important day, but I believe it's only the beginning. Over the next 2 years, the Global Investors for Sustainable Development Alliance will help drive the decade of action towards success and report back to the SG on a regular basis. We all look forward to today's discussions between the Alliance and its member states. We challenge you all to be bold and concrete in offering recommendations for the Alliance to unlock long-term financing for sustainable development goals, particularly in our developing countries. So let's commit to invest in hope, invest in sustainable development, and invest in a better future for all of us. I thank you.
I'd now like to invite the co-chairs of the GISD Alliance, Mr. Oliver Bäte, Chairman of the Board of Management of Allianz, and Dr. Leila Fourie, Chief Executive Officer of the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. Which of you would like to start us off?
Go ahead. Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to acknowledge the Deputy UN Secretary-General, my co-chair, Oliver, fellow members of the GISD, and distinguished guests. It's truly an honor and a privilege for me to have been appointed and to serve as the co-chair of the Alliance of the Global Investors for Sustainable Development and to be addressing you on the occasion of its launch. As business leaders who have committed our time and the time and resources of our organizations to this important initiative, we don't need to be convinced of the need for action. Achieving sustainable development goals means ending poverty, improving health and education, reducing inequality, tackling climate change, preserving the environment, and spurring economic inclusive growth. We understand that the costs of inaction are high and increasing, and that achieving these objectives are critical to ensuring justice, equity, and arguably the future of our planet. The Johannesburg Stock Exchange, the organization that I have the pleasure of leading, is not only in the top 20 exchanges of the world by market caps, but it's also a leader in sustainable development. The JSE was the first exchange in the world to establish a sustainability index and among the first in the world to require its listed companies to disclose what they were doing in relation to environmental, social, and governance issues. It was also a founder member of the UN Sustainable Stock Exchanges initiatives. We have actively sought to provide exchange-based mechanisms for improving SME access to finance, and in 2017, we launched a dedicated green bonds segment. We're currently exploring opportunities around impact investing. Enabling sustainable and inclusive economic growth and development is central to who we are, both because it's the right thing to do and also because we won't have a viable business without it. South Africa, the country which I'm from, and in which our exchange operates, is no stranger to many of the deep social and sustainability issues that the SDGs seek to address. And yet we're also the home to former Nobel Peace Prize winners that were first developing country, and we were the first developing country to issue a green bond. The objective of the GISD Alliance is to deliver concrete solutions to scale up long-term finance and investment in sustainable development. Stock exchanges have long recognized the role that they have to play in this regard. From educating market participants, including regulators, about the relevance of ESG issues, to the long-term health of markets, to encouraging their listed companies to disclose relevant ESG information, to providing innovative financing mechanisms to enable the mobilization of finance. All of this is premised on exchanges working with market stakeholders to craft a collective vision for a better future. This combination of acting where we can and using influencing and convening power where we have it is very much in line with how we envisage the GISD working. While as a group we represent significant financial resources, we not only acknowledge the work that is already underway, but recognize the importance and the need to act in partnership with a much broader constituency. Mrs. Deputy Secretary-General, when the Secretary-General in his remarks at the high-level dialogue on financing for development noted various positive developments in financial markets in supporting the sustainability agenda. He also noted that more needs to be done and that it needs to happen faster. The launch of this alliance is a response to this call. Through dedicated working groups, we will look at ways to increase the long-term supply of investment for sustainable development, enhance the SDG investment opportunities in developing countries, strengthen the impact of private investment on sustainable development. While this initiative is very much about mobilizing finance, it's also about reorienting our finance system to one that focuses on the long term instead of short-term profit maximization, that promotes sustainable social development rather than inequality and exclusion, and sustainable environmental development rather than environmental degradation. I want to thank you, Deputy Secretary-General, and Secretary-General, for appointing me to this alliance, and I want to thank my fellow members of the alliance for agreeing to take up the challenge. I don't delude myself in believing that the task that we have set ourselves is not an easy one. But in the words of a truly great South African, President Nelson Mandela, it always seems impossible until it's done. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Fourie. Could I ask Mr. Bäte to take it on from here?
Thank you for the great introduction, Deputy Secretary-General. I'll keep it very short. German nature is we stay to what we are trying to do. And I would just like to go through what we are having created as a joint statement. And I think it's trying to address everybody in the room of what are we trying to do. So let me just go through the statement and what it means in a very quick way to make sure that we hit what we are trying to do, that is having impact, not having debates. I know that's sometimes very difficult to do, but that's sometimes how the private sector can help the public sector, because we have something that is called an annual account that looks at what actually has been done, and that's what we're incentivized about. So what are we trying to do? As leaders in our investment and business communities, we are convening to support the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, which sets out a vision for a prosperous future for people and the planet, underpinned by sustained, inclusive and sustainable economic development, and facilitate the finance and the investment needs to be successful at it. Now, just a little fact is we're missing about $2 trillion annually in order to achieve these objectives today, $2 trillion annually that need to be mobilized. And we are trying to make our contribution to increase the financial flow into sustainable development. The necessary transformation of business and finance to achieve these development goals is, as we've just heard, not happening at the required scale or speed. And while investment has become increasingly important, there's a lot more work to be done in order to make it really happen. Business needs to develop local solutions and projects. Investors need to step up their support with financing, and policymakers need to set an enabling framework. We've discussed this morning with the Secretary-General that often public and private frameworks do not work in sync. We have, as financial institutions, regulatory frameworks that actually impede our ability to invest in a sustainable way, that make us force on short-term return rather than long-term returns. Or, as we have in our own country, we would like to get out of carbon while our government is yet not sure when and how they're able to do so. So bridging these differences in ambition and bringing them into reality is what we're trying to achieve. That's why we, as investors, are committing today to drive this transformation toward the increasing contribution to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. We, as the Alliance, pledge to scale up and speed up our efforts to align our businesses with the SDGs. We recognize that achieving this is very, very ambitious, and it's not just for one stakeholder group to achieve that, for all of us. That's why we're very happy that the UN is convening us and making sure it uses and leverages its convening power and its persuasion power to hold us all accountable. We view this commitment as being aligned with our duty to both manage multifaceted risks and to support long-term value creation that can meet our obligation to our beneficiaries. In the past, many observers have said there is a conflict between earning a decent return and having sustainable development. We believe this is not the case. It is an artificial conflict. We believe doing good and doing well are exactly the same thing. Our main objective as an alliance is therefore to build a number of initiatives and networks that have already been launched to promote the global goals and to align financing for the 2030 agenda. We set our sights firmly on achieving a dual objective to drive investment and to drive impact to scale to achieve the SDG goals. That also means, by the way, practically, we cannot stand still at the 30 level that we're here today. I invite everybody around the table to look for at least another 9 members so we can scale from 30 to 300 over the next 2 years. Our value added as an alliance is therefore that our pledge goes beyond a single sector, a single country, and the short term. It is hailing from all regions around the world. We commit to do so in a universal and an inclusive manner, and recognizing that our business success is inseparable from sustained, inclusive, and sustainable economic development. As enshrined in the 2030 agenda, we are committed to a longer-term approach to business and making investment decisions. Therefore, our focus as an alliance will be on delivering very concrete solutions to scale up longer-term finance and investment in sustainable development. So you have to measure us, we have to measure ourselves that in 2 years, latest, we have achieved something, not planned something. I will not repeat the ambitious objectives we set out between 1 and 6, but it is making sure that we play a key role in driving them and leveraging the networks that we have. We affirm that the 2030 agenda represents a credible roadmap to achieve long-term investments in which profitability and sustainability do converge and are not at odds with each other to achieve a really prosperous people for all our plans, particularly for our kids. I just got a call from my daughter and said, "Daddy, make sure that you deliver on what you promise." I will.
We're now going to move to some special remarks from members of the GISD Alliance. And I'd like to start by inviting to the lectern up front here, Mr. Xu Gu, President of the Industrial and Commercial Bank of China.
Excellencies, distinguished members of the GISD Alliance, ladies and gentlemen. It's my great honor to attend the GISD Alliance launch with global business leaders and the representatives of UN member states and to discuss the critical issues of financing the SDGs. The 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development represents the broadest consensus of the international community. Supporting the achievement of SDGs is essential for public and business sectors to mitigate environmental and social risks and to seize new development opportunities. As the biggest developing country, China has integrated the 2030 Agenda into domestic, mid- and long-term development plans. Industrial and regulatory policies has been formulated to accelerate sustainable economic and social transformation. For example, in 2016, the People's Bank of China and the 6 ministries jointly issued the guidelines for establishing the green financial system. The China Security Regulatory Commission has stipulated mandatory ESG disclosures by all listed companies and bond issues starting from next year. By the end of June, the total outstanding amount of green loans from 21 major Chinese banks exceed 1.4 trillion USD, to which ICBC contributed 183 billion USD. China is the world's second largest green bond market. Over the past 3 years, ICBC issued a total of 10 billion USD green bonds, including the 3.15 billion USD issuance of last month, which has been by far the biggest single bond issuance by one single commercial bank. Based on China's experience, I would like to share 3 points on how to promote sustainable financing and speed up implementation of the 2030 Agenda. Firstly, creating an enabling environment for sustainable financing with sound regulatory system and consistent international standards. Governments are suggested to clearly define and categorize sustainable financing products and services and establish framework for performance evaluation, ESG ratings and certification, as well as for information disclosure. Fiscal, taxation, environmental, and judicial policy tools can support motivating market players to expand sustainable activities. Meanwhile, unified global standards for green taxonomy, accounting and disclosure are key to provide direction and codes of conduct for global sustainable investment and financing. We should gradually harmonize sustainability standards, bearing in mind the varied development stage of different countries. Secondly, encouraging companies to institutionalize sustainability across business operations. All countries are suggested to take concrete steps to promote successful and replicable ESG investment and financing, and to foster a top-down corporate culture of sustainable development. At ICBC, we embed our growth strategies with the prevailing needs of all stakeholders, committing to maximizing financial, social, and environmental value creation. We place high priority on poverty alleviation and lifting people's standard of living. Leveraging fintech innovation, we introduced a series of digitalized, inclusive financial products. Thirdly, gathering wisdoms from all sides and forging a global partnership of win-win cooperation. Asset owners, investors, financiers should play to their strengths and cooperate extensively on sustainability projects, green loans, SDG bonds, and etc. In 2017, ICBC initiated the Belt and Road Bankers Roundtable, also known as BRBR mechanism. So far, 92 financial institutions from 48 countries and regions have joined as members, we believe the Belt and Road Initiative is aligned with the 2030 agenda. Through the open platform of BRBR, we will implement the Belt and Road green investment principles and tap the full sustainable development potential in relevant countries. Last but not least, all of us should reinforce cooperation on ESG risk management, conducting joint research and the capacity building program so as to better address the challenges to the SDGs. Ladies and gentlemen, as one of the world's largest commercial banks and the signatory of the Principle for Responsible Banking, ICBC is looking forward to join a global partnership to strive for mankind's shared future with common and sustained prosperity. I thank you.
Thank you very much. May I now invite Ms. Miriam Ben Salah Chakroun, Chief Executive Officer of Alliance member Eau Minérale d'Ulm from Morocco.
Mrs. Deputy Secretary-General, Co-Chair, ladies and gentlemen. In developing countries, sustainable development projects supported and financed by several international institutions have proven successful with a positive impact on communities. Despite major social, economic, and environmental challenges, Africa is still struggling with wide social issues, poverty, and climate change. The partnership between investors, governments, and international institutions is of utmost importance. And to pave the way for sustainable programs, we need to focus on operational implementation. And I would like to highlight some most urgent actions to achieve, so we can achieve our goals. We suggest being an enabler as a private sector and or coordinator to work closely with institutions, investors, governments, and all of that in order to first collect and share data information relating to SDGs investment opportunities and market, to have a common shared data is a step ahead in finding and in sharing benchmarks and having the same period of information. And secondly, to simplify the framework of the official development assistance through clear and more flexible procedures. What we do have a lot of procedures that are so heavy that most of the SMEs, and I would like to talk about also small and medium enterprises, because they are the backbone of our African economy, and we definitely need more flexible and more simplified procedures to access to the platform of finance that is proposed today. To develop also more public-private partnership as the backbone of markets development, mainly in, again, simplifying the eligibility criteria for PPPs. We need to have a better functioning between the private, the public partnership, because the real driver for the development and to support of sustainable development goals. To encourage and adopting innovative finance tools and to ensure the risk-return profile of a sustainable development investment. We all are aware, and we've been hearing that all day, all morning, about the challenges to overcome. But you had a great say, it seems impossible until it is done. So we are fully committed to achieve GISD's Alliance objectives. And we all, and for myself, would like to assure that that I will devote effort to create a more inclusive, in my perimeter, sustainable economic opportunities for my ecosystem, and it's already done for some of our businesses, and to mainly benefit all stakeholders, community, the partners, the competitors, and that's the spirit where we are engaged to committed to do. And thank you.
Advani, Chief Executive Officer of Nuveen and member of the GISD Alliance. Thank you.
Deputy General Secretary, fellow members of the Alliance, ladies and gentlemen. It is indeed my honor to be here today to join you for the launch of the Global Investors for Sustainable Development Alliance. At Nuveen, about $1 trillion, or 100% of our assets under management, are subject to our own responsible investing framework and are aligned with the UN principles of responsible investing. Investors are increasingly demanding that their capital be aligned with responsible and sustainable approaches that aspire to make a positive impact to the world. As stewards of our clients' capital, we are also committed to preserving and growing their long-term wealth, whether it's for large institutions and sovereign wealth funds or small individuals. We are committed to driving this group's ambitions through our business strategy and by continuing to champion the adoption of impact investing and other sustainable investing approaches. Critical to this effort, and one of my main my main drivers at work, is improving the standards to sustainability reporting and impact measurement overall, along with improved quality of data information related to SDG investing. My colleagues, who are some of them are in the room here, are working tirelessly towards this goal of impact measurement. Investors want to clearly understand and see how their capital is making an impact. We are working to promote transparent, standardized, meaningful metrics to support this effort. We are currently reporting to our clients on direct social impact in both public and private market strategies, in areas such as greenhouse reduction and a number of affordable housing units that we support. I believe transparent and concrete data like this, along with generating market competitive returns, will drive greater adoption of responsible investing, including SDG-themed strategies across the industry and by investors around the globe. We're working tirelessly with data aggregators and AI companies to help us with this. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today, Madam Deputy Secretary, the Nuveen team, and I look forward to working with you and the members of the Alliance to help further advance these goals. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Advani. May I now invite to the lectern Mr. Juan Carlos Mora Uribe, the Chief Executive Officer of Bancolombia.
Deputy Secretary-General, ladies and gentlemen. At Bancolombia, we strongly believe that our business has the potential to help address the challenges humanity faces, which were clearly raised by the Sustainable Development Goals. We seek to be aligned with international standards that allow us to implement world-class sustainability strategies such as UNPRI, UN Women, the Equator Principles, TCFD, and Climate Action Plus 100+, among others. These protocols allow us to deepen our understanding of global problems and how their solutions can be integrated into our business model. From a financial perspective, we have a comprehensive strategy of sustainable finance focused on environmental and social solutions in renewable energy, energy efficiency, cleaner production, sustainable mobility, green buildings, rural development, financial inclusion, and financial education. We also aim to have these projects included in the Bancolombia Sustainable Green and Social Bond Issuance Program. We strongly believe that considering environmental, social, and governance aspects have a positive impact on the financial performance of investment portfolios. We also recognize that the incorporation of SEG principles help us to act in accordance with the broader goals of society. In Colombia, Panama, El Salvador, and Guatemala, we are articulating efforts to implement initiatives aimed at developing responsible investments, and specific committees have been created to implement these practices throughout the financial industry. Our responsible investment strategy is implemented in all our business units that manage investment or where we advise clients on investment decisions. The commitment of large companies with SDGs is mandatory to help mobilize the Sustainable Development Agenda and to align corporations with the proper management of ESG factors. With this in mind, to address climate change, one of the most important challenges we have as a society, we have begun the process of involving the 13 largest companies in Colombia, including Bancolombia, to commit to a joint goal of reducing greenhouse gases effect in line with the scenario of 2 degrees or less. With our customers in mind, we offer specific products that seek to invest in companies around the world that have high performance in ESG management. We are also working on impact investment with a specific fund that focus on companies and startups with purpose. We believe that the issue of carbon intensity of credit and investment portfolios is extremely relevant, considering the challenge of climate change, together with a clear vision of how these same portfolios are having an impact on the SDGs. The strategy to finance the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development requires not only financing and investment, but also that all companies commit to the SDGs from a shared value ecosystem perspective, working hand in hand with all stakeholders to develop their own business model that finds solutions that generate prosperity based on sustainability. For this transformation, companies need to define a clear purpose and measure the impact that their business decisions have on society. It is mandatory to coordinate a global agenda around shared value ecosystem where companies can identify the role of their business model in helping to solve the challenges posed by the Sustainable Development Goals in aspects such as clean energies, cities and sustainable communities, equality, gender equality, rural development, and financial inclusion. We know that our financial activity generates an impact on society and on the environment through the support we provide to the economic activities of our clients. We are aware that our decisions should contribute to the SDGs agenda, understanding that we can make a difference. Our decisions are oriented to the creation of shared value and the development of our corporate purpose that seek to generate well-being by promoting economic development. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The last of our special remarks comes from Ms. Diane Stewart, the Chief Executive Officer of First State Super. If you could come to the lectern.
Well, many thanks, Andrew. Deputy Secretary-General, co-chairs, and fellow Alliance colleagues, it gives me great pleasure to make a few remarks today. From First State Super's perspective, we care deeply about sustainability, and our members care deeply about sustainability, but we also recognise that there's more to do and that an alliance of this nature can have so much more impact. So I guess to talk to you a little bit about why we think this alliance will have so much impact, or has the potential, I should say, I thought I'd spend a couple of minutes both on what the Australian pension system is, which in Australia is called superannuation, a little bit about First State Super, and then why sustainability and this alliance. So from an Australian pension system perspective, we have close to $3 trillion in assets. And to put that in perspective, we are the 4th largest pension fund in the world, which is quite remarkable considering our 24 million population. And the reason why the assets are so large is that we have compulsory superannuation. So all working Australians need to put aside 9.5% of their salary into their pension. And then secondly, they cannot access that until retirement. And so that's why so many assets have been built up. What that means is that our pension system is twice the size of our GDP and 150% of our stock exchange. So therefore, big pension funds like First State Super need to care a hell of a lot about what's going on globally, not just in Australia, and how to actually fuel economic growth sustainably globally. And I think I speak on behalf of all of the pension fund players here today, that when you think about a pension fund's fiduciary duty, we are by that very nature long-term investors. We need to manage risks and opportunities for long-term value creation. Or think of it a different way from a customer's perspective. We need to look after our customers, our members, that are retiring today or tomorrow. But we also need to look after our members that are coming into our funds today that are not likely to retire until 2070. And actually, they're likely to need their retirement dollars to the turn of the century. So long-term, sustainable investing makes good sense, not just good moral sense as well. From First State Super's perspective, just to tell you a little bit about us, we are one of Australia's largest pension funds. We look after the teachers, the nurses, the police officers, the firefighters, the public servants of Australia. So every dollar counts for our members, but they also care how we invest. So when we look at what we've invested, say in the last couple of years, we've invested in housing affordability, a really critical issue for many of our members. We've invested in carbon transition, particularly in an Australian economy that is very resource intensive. We've invested several billion in renewables. We've also invested, we are the largest private equity player in Australia with 2 state governments that have actually invested in small and medium-sized businesses, providing that capital to allow them to step up to the next stage that underpins great jobs growth and economic growth. And then finally, when we look at infrastructure, we don't just look at infrastructure on the whole, but how does that actually have a positive impact on the community? So we've invested in things like light rail to bring down the carbon footprint, but also investing in the largest in the Southern Hemisphere, firefighters training academy and police headquarters. So you can see how that invests back into the community and has a positive, sustainable impact. So we feel very proud about what we've done, but recognise that there's plenty more to do, and actually done through a much more collective and alliance approach that has, I agree, transparency, clear measures, not just for our own fund, but what we can see globally, would provide far more opportunity. And finally, on a personal note, as I was walking out the door to come here, I'd spoken to my 13-year-old daughter, who is a climate change activist and very proud of it. And she reminded me when I'd spoke to her about the fact that these 30 organisations came to about 16 trillion in both assets and lending. And she said, look, Mum, remember what I did at the beginning of this year? She actually had had enough of the amount of plastic she was seeing in our nearby beach. And she had gone to the local cafes and her principal at her school and said, we need to get rid of plastic straws, plastic cups. And by God, she got it done. And if she can do that just in our local community and have that footprint, she said, with $16 trillion, Mum, can you imagine what I could get done? So I think we have to remember, this is not just about a superficial conversation and making ourselves feel good. If we actually do have really clear targets, really clear focused determination and measurement, by boy, we can have a huge impact. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's issued us all with a challenge to summon the activist instincts of our children. We're going to have some very brief remarks from some of the members of the Alliance who haven't had the chance to speak yet. Time is quite tight, so I would ask you just to keep them to a minute or two if you can. I will open the floor in a second. Just, I want to start with Jay Collins from Citigroup. And could I just advise you all to press the button under your microphone when you're speaking? Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to skip the introduction to the prepared remarks on our commitment to sustainability because I think everyone in the room shares that, and I think we've now embedded into our culture, into our business, into our products and our services, sustainability at our core. And I know that's something shared by everybody here in the room. I'd like to actually focus on the part of the comments that I think relate to how we, as an alliance, work going forward. And I've done several interviews this morning from the press, all asking why this will be different. Why more? So many groups out there, so many initiatives, official, sector. So let me say a couple of things there. One is I think it's true that everyone in this room wants action. We don't want another report on the shelf. We have to do something that makes sure that everything we do through the strategy group process, through the working group process, is action-oriented, and we're going to make an impact. Second is it had been suggested in some of our initial conversations that because there's so much great information out there, that we do a net assessment of what's there already, that we actually just start with short summaries and an awareness of everyone here of what's been done, what's ongoing, what do we like about it, what we don't like about it, so that we actually don't reinvent the wheel. We don't want to say the same things that everyone else has said and is ongoing and doing. We want to build on it. And the only way to build on it is to really start very quickly with how much is out there. Third is the collaborative mechanism that has been put forward in the initial discussions of the Alliance is all about reaching out externally and internally for the absolute best ideas. And what that means is that every one of us have committed to go into our firms and get the best minds to work on a whole series of questions that have been put to the working groups. But also to go out to those experts and groups, official sector and unofficial, that have work in progress, that have ideas, so that, again, as many of the initiatives that will be ongoing, particularly in the official community, that there is a liaison process where we can pull it in. And I had conversations even in the past week with a number of those groups that are willing to put one person to be the liaison. And the Secretary-General very graciously has said there will be a point person for this process for every UN agency and any ongoing effort within the UN, so that ultimately we become an umbrella that draws on others, but importantly then, when we do have action-oriented agreement, that we have a mechanism to push it out to push it out to policy leaders, to push it out to regulators, to push it out to the G7 and the G20, which again the Secretary General has kindly committed that we will have a process to do that. So I think we all have the same sense of urgency. We all have the same sense that this $15 to $16 trillion that Deanne talked about in the room can be extraordinarily powerful. And Citi will do everything we can to collaborate with all of you to make this not just another commission, not just another alliance or process, but to really have an impact. And it's clear that we're at a tipping point now where there is urgency, where there is a need for change, and this group can actually make a difference. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So don't reinvent the wheel. Don't just produce another report which sits on a shelf. Can we hear now from Scott Mather of PIMCO, please?
Yes, we're very pleased also with the Alliance and being able to be a member. I appreciate Jay's comments. Feel very much the same. For those who don't know what we do, we are investment managers. We manage approximately $1.9 trillion for pension funds and manage some of the largest mutual funds in the country. But our role in this, and I think the role we can play in this alliance, is really to use our leadership to mainstream in a large way sustainable finance. And I think we have lots of ideas about things we can pursue together to do that. In some cases, it's getting rid of market failures, and I really do describe that there's a broad set of topics that are really market failures. The markets work well when we can get rid of some of those stumbling blocks. Some of that's regulatory, some of it's reporting. Those are all things. We can join other initiatives and a lot of great work that's been done, but push it over the line. Because as leaders, we sort of have a special place, a special privilege to be able to advance this at a much faster clip. And I describe this as really, for our industry, I describe this as a mega trend. This is something so important. But there's a big disconnect because, we talk to so many institutional investors and they say, yes, I want to invest in a sustainable way, but how do I do it? And so there's a lack, a market failure there, a lack of information, a lack of disclosure. In many cases, it's a lack of tools, a lack of instruments that are out there. Things like SDG bonds, which have been referenced a few times and which some of the Alliance members have taken a leadership position in. Those can be very powerful tools in mainstreaming sustainable finance. And we know that's what our investors want. That's increasingly what they realize is absolutely necessary if you're going to deliver good financial returns. And that's, I think, the special role that we can play as an alliance together, really mainstreaming sustainable finance. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I think the message is clear that we need not just private finance, but we need public frameworks too. So I would like to invite some member states to share their thoughts on this alliance, starting with Sweden, whose important role in forming this alliance we've already heard about. Thank you.
Thank you, Excellencies and distinguished guests. It's a pleasure for me to be here today as well, to be part of the formal launch of the Global Investors for Sustainable Development Alliance. And I'd like to congratulate the Secretary-General for taking this visionary step forward towards financing the 2030 Agenda, and to all of you who are contributing to the formation of this global CEO network. GISD has the potential to be a leading force for change. And change, transformative change, is urgently needed if the world is going to eradicate poverty, achieve gender equality, and reverse the ongoing climate crisis within the coming decade. All stakeholders need to prioritize and align their action and finance towards the full achievement of the 2030 Agenda and the Paris Agreement, and to ensure that no one is left behind. Now, global research shows that only 25% of all capital is managed following some kind of sustainability criteria. So the potential of unlocking these investments in line with the Agenda 2030 is enormous. But in order to move ahead, we also need to change the narrative. from identifying investment gaps to promoting investment opportunities. Rather than a gap-filling exercise, investment in sustainable development needs to be seen as an exercise in matching investment with investors. We have seen ourselves in Sweden through the experience of the network of Swedish Investors for Sustainable Development, which has formed in 2016 as a partnership of 18 institutional investors such as pension funds, asset managers, insurance companies, investment companies, and the Swedish International Development Cooperation Agency. We are proud that our network of Swedish investors has played a role in inspiring the formation of the global initiative that is being launched here today. And we are ready to continue our support to the Alliance. The ultimate target is, of course, to stimulate and engage for more investments in line with the SDGs. And we wish to see the GISD will work on removing obstacles to invest for a sustainable future that ultimately make SDG investing become everyday business and mainstream in the future. New innovative partnerships are a powerful tool to tackle the urgent challenges the world is facing. And today, partnership is leadership. And this is what we want, and this is what we need to engage in, all necessary to force towards a sustainable future that we all want. Now, thank you.
Thank you very much to Sweden's Secretary for International Affairs for those remarks. I'd like to follow them by inviting Morocco's permanent representative to speak. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I'm delighted to participate in this important event, which launches this alliance established by the Secretary-General as part of his strategy of financing the 2030 agenda. 10 years before the 2030 deadline, and given all the challenges facing the achievement of sustainable development, it goes without saying that all forces need to be gathered in order to make the SDGs a reality. The Addis Ababa Action Plan emphasized the role of the private sector in financing the SDGs. And while ODA and public financing remains critical, private sources of investment are essential to meet the scale required. Governments cannot and should not work in silos. All stakeholders, including the private sector and the business leaders, have to be fully on board in order to build and strengthen public-private partnership that can provide large scale of solution for achieving SDGs and ensuring incentives for long-term investment for sustainable development. My delegation welcomes this initiative and looks forward to its actionable delivery. We look at this alliance as a real platform that will enable a conversation, as we said here, out of the box between decision makers, the private sector, and all other relevant stakeholders, which will serve to advance and accelerate the mobilization of further resources for sustainable development. We are convinced that Mrs. Miriam bin Saleh Shakroun, Vice Chairwoman and Chief Executive of Office of Eau Mineral d'Olmes, will spare no effort to fulfill the mandate of this alliance. We fully support her personal engagement in advancing the achievement of the SDGs, and we are proud that Moroccan woman is joining this journey. She is the best among the best women in Morocco, and I would like to congratulate the SG, Sir António Guterres, for his choice. And I would like also to assure him that she will deliver with efficiency, dedication, heart, and high spirit of responsibility. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We hear now from the permanent representative for Indonesia.
Thank you, Moderator. Distinguished members of the Global Investor for Sustainable Development Alliance, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to congratulate the Secretary-General and his team for launching the Alliance. The launching is timely as we are working to reduce the SDG financing gap, which is estimated around $2.5 trillion per year. Meeting this gap obviously requires stronger partnership with all stakeholders, including the private sectors and investors. Indonesia therefore welcomes the establishment of the Alliance. The Alliance hopefully could facilitate business leaders' engagement and could also provide strategic guidance in mobilizing longer-term investment for sustainable development. We welcome the participation of Ms. Sinta Wijaya-Kamdani of Indonesia. As member of the Alliance, we believe that the experience and work of the sustainable development will bring constructive contribution to the group. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, in the last 4 years, we see a growing interest among investors in SDGs-related investments. We need to have more open and constructive conversations among states, UN entities, and the private sectors. At the UN, we are good with speeches, but I think we need to speak in the same language with the private sectors and listen to them more. According to a study, business opportunities in the SDGs are estimated to be worth $12 trillion and to create 380 million new jobs by 2030. Investing in SDGs tends to require long-term approach, while financial market decisions are often more short-term orientation. Of course, there are risks, so we must understand that private sectors need incentives and reassurance that their investment generates sufficient returns to compensate the potential risks. It is also obvious that governments should create an enabling environment for investment and thus need to work with the business community. To conclude, Indonesia looks forward to the work of the Alliance. There are many areas that might be useful to enhance this partnership. 2030 is not that far away. Time is not on our side, and we need to master all available resources to achieve the SDG. Thank you, Moderator.
Thank you. We're going to hear now from the Deputy Permanent Representative for Canada.
Merci, Monsieur le Modérateur. Je vais débuter mon allocution en français, si vous me le permettez, pour profiter de ces interprètes qui travaillent si bien ici aux Nations Unies. Le Canada souhaite remercier le secrétaire général pour le lancement de cette importante initiative. Nous sommes aussi reconnaissants aux chefs du secteur privé ici présents dans cette salle en si grand nombre. Ils se sont joints à cette alliance pour les investisseurs mondiaux pour le développement durable avec un engagement qui, je crois, nous inspire tous. Votre présence ici en si grand nombre n'était pas gagnée. Vous êtes dans l'enceinte des Nations Unies et on se rappelle très très bien, nous, le Canada, lorsque nous avions fondé le groupe des amis pour le financement durable, ce n'était pas gagné. L'union entre le secteur privé et l'ONU n'était pas nécessairement une union facile au début, mais nous sommes très heureux d'être ici dans cette salle et de vous accueillir au sein des Nations Unies. As we all know, the world possesses more than enough financial resources to make our sustainable goal a reality. But as we also know, there is a fundamental coordination problem between where capital is and where it is needed. The search for security and liquidity has led to over $17 trillion to be put in negative yielding securities. Meanwhile, entire continents starve for capital where transformative investments remained orphaned. Solving this and related issues will require bold thinking and new kinds of partnerships with the private sector, as we have heard today. This is why we so warmly welcome today's launch of the Global Investors for Sustainable Development initiative. As we heard during the Financing for Development high-level dialogue, which we were so pleased to co-facilitate with Ghana, the private sector has the formidable resources, creativity, and cutting-edge technology required to develop concrete solutions to many of the challenges currently preventing us from making rapid progress. That said, we know that many of the members of the Global Investors for Sustainable Development Initiative are already active in promoting sustainable development. We've heard from some of them today. But we also have Canada's own, who is in this room, Michael Sabia, who has demonstrated the kind of leadership we all are looking for through his efforts in launching the Investors Leadership Network last year with the other institutional investors from across the G7 with over $6 trillion in assets under management. This initiative seeks to address the global infrastructure gap through an infrastructure fellowship program for senior public sector managers from developing countries. It also seeks to confront the threat posed by climate change by promoting the recommendations of the Financial Stability Board's Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures. And it addresses gender inequality through an investment foundation's internship program with the CFA Institute to provide up to 1,800 women from developing countries training and internship opportunities to pursue career in finance and investment. These efforts are, I hope, only the beginning of the global conversation on the important role that the private sector can play in supporting and promoting sustainability to ensure that we leave no one behind. Expectations are indeed high, but we are confident that this new initiative launched today will be an important part of the overall effort that all of us must exert as we enter into a decade of action for achieving sustainable development and climate action goals by 2030. You can count on the full support of Canada, both in our national capacity and as the co-chair, along with Jamaica, of the Group of Friends for SDG financing in this regard. I thank you very much for your attention. Je vous remercie.
Thank you very much. We would now like to hear from the permanent representative for Colombia, please. We're going to actually go straight on to some remarks from Richard Gottheim, if he can make himself known. There you go. Thank you, Richard. Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to say a few words from the Swedish Investor for Sustainable Development, which is part of the inspiration for the UN forming of the Global Investor Sustainable Development. And I wanted to do it from the encouraging side. We have been working in the Swedish network for 3 years. And if you come together as a partnership and really focus on acting and try to get things in place for investments and other action, it is possible. We have addressed like 7 of the different SDGs with investing opportunities, reports and things, obstacles for investing. So I just want to leave the audience with an encouraging, it is possible with the partnerships.
It's a very constructive note on which to end. So I think we've heard from a great array of different companies and countries, but there seems enormous consensus here that the challenge now is to marry the UN's convening power with the ambition of this motivated group of representatives from the private sector. It is time to move from debates to action. We look forward to covering that action as journalists at the Financial Times. But let me ask the Under-Secretary-General for Economic and Social Affairs, Dr. Zhenmin Liu, to give us some closing thoughts.
Thank you. Thank you, Andre, for moderating this session. Excellencies, co-chairs, distinguished members of the GISD Alliance, ladies and gentlemen. Today, we have witnessed a piece of United Nations history. The launch of the Global Investors for Sustainable Development GISD Alliance by the Secretary-General is a major milestone for the engagement of the private sector with the United Nations. For the first time in history, the United Nations Secretary-General is convening such a distinguished group of global business leaders from all regions of the world. Timing is significant. We know we are falling short of mobilizing the necessary investments to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. What then is needed to reverse these trends and to set out
set us on the right path towards sustainable development. The answer is very clear. We need decisive leadership from all actors and at all levels. This is where the spotlight will be set on GISD Alliance. I'm very pleased with the level of commitment I have seen today from the GISD members. The heads of some of the world's largest asset owners and managers, banks and technology companies have agreed to be part of the solution. The joint statement issued today by the GISD Members Alliance is an important first step. It builds on existing initiatives. It identifies some critical areas for action to advance above and beyond the status quo. But we need to move to implementation immediately. For example, to accelerate the necessary shift to a long-term approach to investments for sustainable development, the GISD Alliance should work on the development of long-term performance metrics and benchmarks. Indeed, the GISD Alliance has set a specific focus on ensuring that more investments are channeled to the places and the sectors most needed. Scalability of investment opportunities is essential. This can be achieved by pooling projects and by promoting innovative financing facilities and tools. The GISD Alliance members have also agreed to take critical steps to align their business practices with sustainable development. This will entail aligning standards for sustainability, reporting, and impact measurement. Strengthening the quality of data and information relating to the SDG investments and markets will also be very important. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the objectives of this GISD Alliance are ambitious, but that is precisely what is needed considering the challenges ahead of us. I'm looking forward to the first results of its work at the Financing for Development Forum and SDG Investment Fair in April in 2020. In the meantime, I wish to encourage all member states and other stakeholders to engage with the GISD Alliance as much as possible. We need to join forces and bring all relevant actors to the table to achieve our shared goals for people, planet, and prosperity. My department, the Department of Economic and Social Affairs, is ready to facilitate the performance of the GISD Alliance in mobilizing investment for sustainable development. Before I conclude, please allow me to thank the government of Sweden for its generous support to the GISD Alliance. I would also like to thank colleagues from the UN system agencies, the World Bank Group, and IFC for their outstanding support to the launch of the GISD Alliance. I thank you for your attention. Thank you, Andrew.
That now concludes the launch. Onwards to action. Thank you.